Tim, welcome to the show. Or sorry, I should say Tima. Welcome to the show. Nice to have you.
So looks
Tim,
good.
Yeah, she looks good. I don't know, there wasn't that much movement when I was interviewing Brandon, right? Is it moving like this a while ago? Was my head
a little loose? You've gotten loose since then.
I guess so. It's that one beer I had. So Tim, welcome to my league. Happy to have you on the show today. You want to start the Cool Cats and Kittens League last season. You put a bat signal out there to the Instagram world to see if we could fill up, and then we reconnected through this league, which has been awesome because we hadn't talked in as much in the last few years. But why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and the connection a little bit? Let's talk about that connection.
Sure. Well, first I'll do a quick introduction. I just also will touch upon a little bit around how Brandon and I decided to sort of start this league as a whole thing too. But my name is Tim Che. I work in finance and tech. I've been based in San Francisco for the last 11 years, but during COVID, my wife and I moved out to Vegas. It was October of 2020 now. So been based in Vegas. But yeah, I think, fantasy football has been something that me and my close high school friends we just utilize that as a way for us to just stay in touch with each other, ever since we graduated, because a lot of us sort of split away into different parts of the US. Brandon went to Buffalo, John went to Boston with me, different schools, but in Boston area together. It was just a good, fun way for us to just get involved, stay in touch together. So I got to know Ryan through John in college, and Sergey during grad school, and Brandon was in grad school. Who am I kidding? I don't have a degree in college. I didn't go to grad school. But yeah, Brandon sort of went out to Sacramento, that whole area where we grew up, got to sort of meet Sergey through that when they were going to school together. Yeah, so really, Brandon and I just created Cool Cats and Kittens because we've played redraft leagues all the time, but there was something around this dynasty concept that was really just picking up. And I think dynasty's on the upswing. I think a lot of people want to be part of it, but we just felt like you just needed massive sort of commitment from people who are committed long-term in order for it to be successful. So it's been, honestly, man, Brandon and I, we don't go a week without just talking about how excited we are about this season with 8 managers. We have no fucking worries about whether they're going to be staying here for long term or not. And hopefully, obviously our goal is to get to 10, but hey, if we can't find that caliber, I mean, with Kyle, Sergey, and Travis joining, I think they've upped the bar a lot. And certainly if we can't cross that threshold for our 9th and 10th manager, I mean, I'm happy rolling with this 8 until we fucking die, right? So I'm excited to be in this group, and I think it allows us to just stay in touch with one another and just build a closer friendship. Hopefully we do this shit for at least 30, 40 years, right?
Yeah, that sounds exciting. So how did you feel about your last season? Obviously, I think you had some high hopes for the draft. You had I don't know how much spreadsheeting you've done, but I know that you were going in with some pretty specific moves, and I think you came out. You're a little bit disappointed as to where your team was at when you came out. So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be first to be, admit, I think I was really disappointed at my draft last year, specifically because I think the result of me being disappointed after the draft was because I just didn't put in the time that I usually do in these drafts. And then just using excuses. I mean, there was a lot of travel I was doing last year, and there's just a lot of things that I just wasn't able to put time into. So, but, I came out of that draft. I think ultimately for me, it was almost like, I don't know. I don't think anyone knows what they're trying to do when you're going to a dynasty starter. I mean, for me, at least, it was the first time dealing with anything like that. Who knew someone was going to end up as a contender or come out as, someone that needs to rebuild. But the reality of it was somewhere around, round 3. I remember, it was a 4th round or 3rd round. I had the chance to pick up either Zeke or DeAndre Swift. I didn't know much about DeAndre Swift. I remember talking to Brandon about it a little bit, but I ultimately decided to go with DeAndre Swift, being a talented sort of second-year player coming into his second year at that time. And I just felt like when I picked him up with the 3rd round, And then I went the Cam Akers route, injured towards fucking, Achilles. But I picked him up with the ninth round draft pick. It was the writing was on the wall for me, right? That I was going to leave this draft and I'm going to have to go into this rebuild mode from the get go. I mean, Brandon calls it rebuild. It was just, I needed to build something because I wasn't going to be competitive. I wasn't going to even be a contender for the playoff spot. So that was essentially sort of the head that I was going into the season after the startup draft.
Let's talk through some of the moves then following that draft. I mean, anyone, that's done any sort of fantasy with you knows that like you're one of the most active people. Never really content, always looking to build, always looking to improve or, go in a direction. So right out of the gate, I mean, you made some moves that I think were in line with that sort of feeling coming out of the draft. Are there any in your mind that really stand out that, kind of, I mean, we've discussed the Jonathan Taylor. I don't know how much more time we should spend on that because that really changed the direction of your season. But is there anything else over the last year that you feel like really brought you to where you are now?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of luck plays into it, right? Like, who the fuck would have thought Jonathan Taylor blows out like that? John and Javonte Williams that I'll touch on a little bit, who just feels like he's going to be a really great dynasty sort of asset. But Eves, during our interview with Eve, we were just talking about the very first trade of the inaugural season, right? Was me trading away Travis Kelce and DeAndre Hopkins, and in return getting a Darren Waller, younger tight end, who I viewed as a similar top tier tight end group. So I felt like I wasn't dropping too much. I was just getting younger. And in exchange, I got 2 firsts and a second out of it, along with, some, like I think I got Clear Herbert out of it or whatever. Gaskin, or I got Michael, Gaskin and
Gainwell.
Kenneth Gainwell. So that was, my whole thought going into it was, hey, I came out of this draft. I'm already not going to be able to compete for a playoff spot this year. I see Eve's roster. I see Brandon's roster. I see Ryan's roster. I saw Adam and Jones. And I just felt like, hey, there's 5 teams that I feel like are just better than me off the bat. And, in Dynasty, I just felt like what was really unique was I just felt like, you know what, if I'm the first to fold in this game, I feel like I can go out when everyone's at their hype, thinking that they're going to be a playoff contender. They're going to be a contender for the championship. And I feel like I can buy these draft picks for cheap. And, there's got to be a reason why draft picks are included in Dynasty. There's got to be a reason why Dynasty is so popular. And I just felt like there's a chance that these draft picks were going to be undervalued at the time that I was making these trades. And it's kind of like what you did in the offseason this year, Brandon. Like the first to lay down the cards and go all in on a rebuild when you're the first to set a direction. I think you have absolute unfair advantage to do so. So that was the first move that I made with Eve. And then at that point, it was just cemented what I got to do. And I think, you gave me shit every single fucking week as like the bottom cellar dweller. And it's like, I was actually okay with that, right? It's a productive struggle that we talk about. And I was excited about being in a fantasy league for the first time where it wasn't just like one season. It's like, you know what? I can play for multiple seasons with the same group of fucking guys, and I'm going to show them in 3 years. Right. And I think that was my mentality. It's like, hey, my 2022 contingent is not in play. 2023, not in play. But if I can maximize my chances for 2024 and beyond, that's what I'm going to do. And that was the slew of moves that I've made since then. And I think I'm looking at the trade roster, right? Like I made the most amount of trades than anyone else last year. I made 24 trades. I think the second person was like 8 at John. And I think 3 of those were mine. So, I think that was sort of the mentality that I had going into it. But in terms of sort of like, so that was the kickoff. So that's what was memorable to your question. I think the other things, obviously Jonathan Taylor, that was, we'll talk about that in a little bit, not necessarily on the Jonathan Taylor piece, but just the how I feel sort of handcuffed to Jonathan Taylor. And we'll talk about sort of the offseason stuff that, made me feel like I had to do more. But the other memorable trades for me, I think I really had just that one more positive trade that was good for me, which was the trade with you on sending Eckler away. And I also knew that you were high on Eckler because when we played in 2019, you loved Eckler and he was only better. Now, like last year than he was in 2019, being the workhorse. Plus, I just really like Javonte. And I just felt like the trade value between Eckler and Javonte from a dynasty standpoint after just one season would be pretty even. And I was able to sort of get the first and second from you, right? On top of that, and obviously I wanted T. Higgins. I think you were smart in holding on to T. Higgins, but that was the end result for me of what I got. But those are the 2 positive highlights for me. I think obviously I made a lot of other moves. Like I said, there was 24 in total, but I still remember like a lot of the bad trades. And I think I'm learning from a lot of these things of just being overly active, which was It was really like the midseason trades when Jonathan Taylor started popping off. I'm like, shit, dude, I might be able to get in the playoffs, especially with Adam sort of his wheels falling off with the injured Derrick Henry. And then that's when I made the trade for sending Cam Akers away, who I should have kept. Looking back, for Zeke, who Zeke has no value. Like he's probably going to have no value after the season. And what team would want Zeke other than a contender, which I guess it's me, but you know, Cam Akers is probably going to be a accruing asset, probably not going to get any lower than what he's right now. And I think I traded another player along with Cam Akers. I don't know if it was this trade or the other trade I did with John, which is another trade I regret, but I sent over Chris Godwin, right? I sent out Amon-Ra St. Brown in that trade, who I felt good about. But I think it's just like the patience thing that I was just like, you know what, maybe I'm not losing too much trading these guys away, but what I really should have done is just saying, you know, I don't care about making the playoffs. I was never supposed to be here, and just sort of hold on and be patient with sort of what I did. But yeah, that trade in particular, I was like, man, I don't necessarily feel good about that. And then the other trade of trying to get Calvin Ridley, and then I sent over Chris Godwin, who I think were already pretty similar in value when I was making that trade. And then I got, you know, Ridley, and then he just decided to fucking retire, basically. You know, he still hasn't played a single snap for me since then. So, you know, those are sort of like the memorable traits for me that sort of made me feel like it's like there's a lot of depth to Dynasty.
So you mentioned obviously Jonathan Taylor. I think that's going to be a key that we're going to probably talk about through this whole interview. Also, you know, how much do you think, or how much did the inability to acquire more of those young assets or draft picks, how much did that influence going forward? Or was it just that you had some guys break out a little bit before you thought they would?
I don't think so. Mid-season last year, I don't think I was necessarily affected or any of my moves were influenced because I couldn't get more firsts. Like I'm talking about like Adam, I'm talking about Ben, I'm talking about you know, Chota, who are no longer here.
All of his already.
Yeah, exactly, right. Thankfully, but all the other ones, I was trying to get Ryan's pick I was trying to get Adam's pick forever. There was obviously players, Kyle Pitts. I was targeting him the moment I traded all these top pieces away. I'm like, I need to get Kyle Pitts. And like you said, there's so many moves, you know, that I try to make with Adam and some other managers, just never really panned out. But you know, I felt like I was pretty decently stacked. I think at the end of the conclusion of last season, where I finished fourth, I think I ended with 11 first rounds over the next 3 years. So it's still good. I mean, it's nowhere to, you know, the tier that you're at now with all full active, you know, 8 managers that we have. But the inactivity of me not being able to secure all the first round picks that you have today is probably the biggest sway in terms of how I took my off season this year, and the mentality that I took there and the trades that I had made is because of that.
So let's talk about that. I know that was a big piece, and just background. I don't know if everyone knows, but Tim was in Korea right after our new manager draft, when kind of the flurry, or during our new manager draft. Yeah. So the flurry of action that kind of went on following that, I would say mainly me kind of selling everything, accruing those draft picks, tearing it down, beefing up some of those contender teams you weren't privy to, just being on the other side of the world in a different time zone. How did that impact? I know it did. How did that impact your strategy now going in as a team with those 11 at that time first round picks for the future and a relatively solid team already?
Yeah, I mean, so the first thing, the word that comes to my head is just FOMO. Like, I mean, you know me, like I just want to be part of the fucking action, man. I think at the end of the day, that's all I fucking want. And I'm sitting over there fucking Korea, and I've got meetings from like 9 a.m. to fucking 10 p.m. because it's like, it's been a while since I've been there for work. So I'm like, God damn, right? I get no piece of this action, especially when these new managers come in. And I thought Kyle would be active because he left that draft, you know, as a contender. And he's like, okay, he's going to make some moves because there's clearly weaknesses at the QB spot. But I thought Sergio was going to hold his picks just because of the roster that he came out with, right? He picked his blue chip, or who, you know, the blue chip young assets. And I saw he was going to build for the future. And then I start to see all these trades that are being made for not just the first round draft picks, which I think all of them you own now, but just players too, right? And then as soon as I came back, I'm like, guys, get me in this fucking trade. And then that was I just trading player for player for Brandon Ayuk and Pat Freiermuth, because I was like, I'm looking at my roster. It's like, okay, Gronk may not even come back this year. And that's obviously my biggest fucking weakness. And you saw even before that trade with Eve on Pat Freiermuth, it was however you fucking say his name, but like how Eve's like to call it Firemouth. I just had a bunch of dart throws at, you know, tight ends that I felt like were like tight end 10 to tight end 15 territory. It's like, let's see who fucking pans out. But the biggest thing here was a couple. So I came into this off season and my goal wasn't to be a contender this year, right? Because I look at my team even before all these trades in the off season as maybe I can get the playoffs, but I know my team's on the uprise, right? They're all coming into their age. They're not even in their primes this year. They're going to be good for the next 4 or 5 years. So I'm like, you know, I have a team that's going to be accruing in terms of talent and opportunities as the season goes. I just want to make the playoffs again. You know, like that was basically my goal, because I'm sitting over here at hoarding of the draft picks still. And then I see you getting all these first rounds and all of a sudden you end up with 12 when I have 11. I'm like, Jesus fucking Christ. Like now I feel like this is where it connects with Jonathan Taylor. We've talked about this, Brandon, where it's like running backs timelines are relatively short. You're talking about at max 4 years of a running back's time, maybe 5, where you have to utilize it if you have a player like Jonathan Taylor. Right. And this is like having Adrian Peterson in his prime, or, you know, like all these players that you know are going to be RB1s for a very long time because of their talent and their opportunity that they have. It's rare when they come, but if you're lucky enough to have them on your roster when that time does come, I felt like I was doing a disservice to myself by not maximizing that timeline. And I was okay with it, by the way, before all your first round hoarding, you know, you did this off season, which is, I don't care if I don't maximize on this. I'm not at that odds because I'm still the strongest in terms of next 3, 4, 5 years out. But I see once you got all those draft picks and I see you, you know, selling for assets now into draft picks, I'm like, Brandon's going to be very, very fucking competitive come 2024, 2025. And he's probably going to be a playoff come 2023 at minimum. And I'm just over here. I'm like, you know what? I have to maximize the next 3 years. And the challenge for me there was, all right, I got to become a contender in this window that I have in the next 3, 4 years before Brandon comes on full power. And I have to sort of make sure I don't mortgage all of my picks away. But thankfully I was able to accrue enough where I can use some, still have league above average in terms of the first round draft capital that I have, but get myself into contention. So that was the move. You know, Pitts was the move that I just did because, you know, that's who I've been eyeing for such a long time. He fits my timeline so well. And I've had this, you know, void at tight end. And I feel like if I get Pitts, then I don't have to worry about that position now. But then the move for Josh Allen with you, that was basically the biggest move that I had made to sort of get into that. The one piece, by the way, on the Josh Allen trade that I'll talk about, Brandon, now that the trade's all complete, there was a specific reason I wanted to go after a quarterback. And there was a specific reason I reached out to you about Josh Allen. There's two. So quarterbacks, I'm rolling with Lamar Jackson, or I'm rolling with Kyler Murray, Justin Fields, and Zach Wilson as a result of me trading away Lamar Jackson to Choda earlier last year in the inaugural season. But okay, if I'm not trying to be a contender, I can wait on them, take a bet, see if any of them sort of like do better this season, for example. But if I'm trying to be sure that I'm a contender, I can't have gaps at the QB2 position. And so I can't rely on a Justin Fields or a Zach Wilson to step up. And it's rare to see quarterbacks going from 1 to 2, first year to second year to become a QB1 all of a sudden, right? It usually takes them 3 years to really get into that fold, unless they start off on fire off the bat, like a Kyler Murray, for example. So, you know, that's why I was like seeking out a quarterback specifically. But within Josh Allen, it was, all right, obviously I felt like the only quarterback that's of that tier of teams that are willing to trade me were just you, right? So, because everyone else has timelines. I actually reached out to Eve about Pat Mahomes, but I knew that the trade wouldn't make sense because he's trying to contend. But I looked at Josh Allen as a very strategic thing for me, which is, I don't think I've talked to you about this, which is, okay, so you have 15 draft picks, and I called it the great experiment, which is, you know, those are assets that are awesome, but they sooner or later, they have to turn into players that actually produce at the high caliber levels that I believe it will. But then I look at the dynasty aspect of the league that we're in, which is 2 QBs. So in 2 QBs, you need to have a top tier 2 QB output. And if you look at the contender tier and the playoff tier, every one of them don't have a single weakness at the QB spot, right? You can argue who's 1, 2, 3, or 4, but we know that they're set. And I feel like it's going to be really hard for you to pick 2 quarterbacks of a Josh Allen caliber, let alone 1, you know, for those 15 draft picks. Who knows? So I felt like if I took Josh Allen away, who's a guaranteed thing for the next decade, away from my biggest contender from 3 to 4 years from now, and I take that away from him, who still fits in my contender window, that's got to be something where I can strengthen my time window now, but also be able to be something, maybe it becomes your biggest void come 3-4 years when all these draft picks do turn into the Bijans and things like that. So that was sort of my thoughts going into that Josh Allen trade there.
So you and Brandon obviously started this league as a form of passive income. So now that this isn't going to work anymore, what's the plan for you?
Well, I don't think I ever looked at it as a passive income as much as it's a passive expense, buying the trophies and the rings and shit like that. I just, want a fun experience for everyone across the board. But hey, Yves, I think if you have a chance to win the ring or the championship this year, it's going to be this year only, because I'm gunning for everyone's throats for the next 5 years. I'm calling it right now. I better win at least 3 in the next 5. I'd be surprised if I don't get there.
Ooh. Oh,
Wow.
wow.
I'm writing that down.
You're on national TV right now.
Absolutely.
huh?
I'm making a call out to the fucking world right
This
now.
is going to be trending on
Not
Twitter.
two.
This is
Not
trending
Not
on
one,
Twitter.
not 2, maybe
This is-
3.
I'll bet $6 on that.
Let's do it. Canadian dollars.
Done. So Tim, what kind of dirt do you have on the rest of the league that you get these lopsided wins whenever you make trades with them?
I think I like to say that I do my job very thoroughly on digging up dirt, but also in researching trades. I think that's the part that I like a lot, right? And it's like even at work too, like a lot of my work is negotiation, right? A lot of my work is commercial side, a lot of, that's just, I think, how I'm wired. But I think in any given negotiations, I think you have to approach it from a standpoint of like, there isn't a winner and a loser. You have to figure out how do both of you win, or how do you frame it in a way that makes sense where both of it looks like it comes out on top, because otherwise who the fuck would fucking trade? And I think that's the way that I've approached it, which is, for me, I have constant conversations with almost every manager in the league just to see how they're thinking about their rosters right now. And I do that week to week. So when I know that you feel desperate, or I feel like you're trying to go for it this year, then I know I can make certain moves that maybe feels like you're climbing the hill, or you're topping something over, needle moving, where I can sort of get what I want from a long-term standpoint or a timeline standpoint of what I'm looking at. So I think that's actually the part that I really fucking enjoy about just football and fantasy, but that's the part that I enjoy even more in the dynasty format, because I think there's multi dimensions that get added into a dynasty trade negotiation versus redraft leagues.
Yeah, it makes sense. I like how you guys are taking my questions that are like so random and you're just still reframing them in a way that actually makes sense in the context of this interview. I'm just trying to throw you off and it's not even working right now.
No, Tim's locked in right now.
I know.
No,
I know.
I will say anytime, and I think anyone that's like negotiated on a trade with Tim, like it's intimidating for sure, but that's not the strategy you use. I think you put in the work, right? Like you said, those conversations, and like sometimes you'll make comments and I'm like, I didn't even think about my team in that way. Like you're constantly analyzing everybody's team, where they're at, like what their timelines are, everything like that. So I think that's really reflective in negotiations with you, because it's I don't think it's ever really happened where it's just like the offer that you send is so far out there or not in line with what I'm trying to do or what other teams are trying to do. And that's what kind of makes it hard to, just say no.
except for that last Javonte trade you sent me. That was definitely not.
Well, you sent me a Cordero Patterson, $6 actually, not even Cordero, $6 on Fab for Javonte Williams. So
hey, that seems fair.
Still out there.
I'm still offended you didn't take my Mike Boone trade.
No, I think the fun, again, the reason I love all this stuff, and I think it helps, is that I absolutely fucking love dynasty football. I love fantasy football, and I fucking love dynasty. And it makes me look at everyone's roster all the fucking time. I probably spend 15 fucking hours a week, and 3 of that's on spreadsheets, right? And it sometimes it pans into something, but that work compounds, and then I have a general idea of, maybe like Brandon said, maybe there's a way that I look at your roster different than even the managers themselves, right? And the reason I was able to pull off the Josh Allen trade, first of all, I don't think anyone should ever be thinking any player is off limits for everyone. right? I think there's always a price that you can put on anything. No one's fucking dumb. But I think even the Josh Allen trade is an example, right? Like, I know what Brandon's trying to do. I know he's trying to go all in for rebuilding for the future. I think the thing that really I felt like was going to be a way for me to sort of resonate in his head to think about trading Josh Allen away. It's like, hey, if you take my picks away, you are playing a solo top game in terms of building for the future, and you have an index of superstars that you're going to be pick without anyone competing against you, and that's enticing, right? If for a manager like Brandon, who is committed to going all in to rebuild for the future, I just got to know what he's wanting to commit to, and I got to speak the language, right? I feel like I'm giving life lessons, but like it applies to everything when you're doing negotiations or trade and anything in life. So that's the part I just love about the dynasty.
So Tim, I've never known you to sugarcoat anything, and your season recap, preview, whatever you guys want to call it, it's bullshit. You guys were definitely being nice to some of the people on the team, except for me. You guys were fucking really mean to my team, and I feel there was a ageism discrimination going on that you'll also get in the HR department email here soon. So tell me, how do you really feel about the rosters? And what are you going to do about mine? Because I'm going to definitely beat you in the finals.
All right. Okay. So now that I'm the one being interviewed, I'm the hot seat. Forget about this sort of, political aspect of it. I'm just going to really talk about how I feel. So thank you for letting me have that opportunity, because it's obviously a lot for me to want to say. I'll start with the sleeper sort of, how the sleeper sort of rosters are at right now. So starting with Cup to Canada, Eve. I think your team is irrelevant in 2 years. I think you're going to be in the shitters of consistent lottery picks for at least 3 years straight. Because I think a lot of the moves that you made, even with the inaugural season, you pushed too many chips into the pot. And unfortunately, I thought it was enough. But I think that the hard part was not having that be enough to sort of turn the tide. And I just think about, like, you even wanted to go for it this year, for example. I just don't see how that pans out. That said, Yves, I talked to you, like, in the mid-season or the off-season, which is, hey, I got your first this year. I think it's in it for your best interest for you to want to rebuild in the mid-season this year. If so, make me your first call, because I got your first, and you can double dip in terms of the trade value that you sort of get out of that mix. So that's how I feel about Yves' team. I think you're going to have Pat Mahomes, obviously Matt Stafford. Two, I actually feel really good about.
Tima Kimes is off the chain right now. Yves doesn't like her very much.
I think David.
Can you see my middle finger?
It's a little bit it's a little blurred out right now. I think Zoom's doing that intentionally. But yeah, look at Derrick Henry. You think he's going to be good for next 2-3 years, but I mean, you sit historically with running backs that get over 760, 770 type of carries, like, they just die. And Derrick Henry basically died last year. I just don't see how the 28 going on 29 comes back healthy. Like, even Adrian Peterson, as godly as he is, sure, he has some, like, that one sort of good season, but he's been an RB2 forever, and you paid RB1 prices for him. So David Montgomery, I don't think he's anything worth more than an RB2, RB3. I am scared about your receivers, though. I think they're going to be good for a decent long time. Actually, I actually don't mind Devontae Adams going to Vegas. I think that the ceiling has been reduced because he's not getting the ball thrown by Aaron Rodgers anymore, but I think they're going to be like right receiver ones for at least 3 years. So maybe that becomes your pieces that you can sort of look to sort of, turn over. But Travis Kelce, I think this is going to be the last season where you get premium value for him. But the question is, who wants to trade for him? Because all the contenders that would want to trade for Travis already has tight end sort of locked in. All right, so moving over to Ryan. That's all shit talking on Yves' team there. Sorry. Ryan's team, I was not sugarcoating anything when Brandon and I were chatting. I actually feel very strong about Ryan's dynasty outlook as well as his contender outlook. I actually think, as much as, I like to think I'm savvy, as much as Brandon's, savvy, I just feel like Ryan is a very, very, very savvy manager. Yves, I think you're greedy, and I think it eats away into your long-term play in dynasty. But I look at I look at Ryan, and he's just so fucking savvy. And Eve, you mentioned this on your interview, which is I think he doesn't make that many moves, but when he
I don't want
does,
you to see my emotions.
when Ryan does make his moves, I'm just like, damn, that's smart. Or sometimes like he had a mid-season trade last year with Brandon. I was just confused about it, but it just played out, right? Like he's just savvy as fuck. And you know, I think I just look at the players. God, I fucking wish I had Jamar Chase, right? Like, I wish I had Antonio Gibson, who's probably not high value, but you know, is going to have a potential chance for him to recoup his value that he had going into his fourth season, still young. T. Higgins, I've always been high on him. I think Mark Andrews is going to be TE1, not the TE1 tier, but the TE number 1 for the next 2-3 seasons. And this draft that we saw with the Ravens, where the fucking target's going to go? Rashad Bateman and Mark Andrews. That's it. Right. So I just look at Ryan's team and it just gets fucking stronger every year. And sure, we've gotten lucky as a league that we had Tyreek Hill going to Miami. But then on his fucking roster, he's got Marquise Brown, who's in a better situation than he was last year. I think he's probably going to be better. And then you got Jalen Waddle, who I'm super high up on his bench. Probably not even making the flex spots for him this year. And he's got a lot of his picks. He might not have first, but he's got every pick other than that. He's got some extra picks from other trades too. So he's young and he's built to contend now, as we saw last year. So I just look at his team as not just the OG champ, but his team's gotten stronger and deeper. And most of his depth is only getting stronger over time. So it's so fitting. Brandon and I are talking about it. Ryan's Brazier dynasty. It's like the word dynasty is, I think, fitting for him. And I look at Ryan as like, I don't know if he's going to be number 1 going to preseason next year or number 2s or number 3s, but he's always going to be part of that top tier for as many years as I can sort of imagine. I think he's still going to be in contender when Brandon comes into power, right? So I feel very good about his roster. I think he's very savvy. Kyle, now going over to Kyle, Kyle's very savvy too. I think the thing that we're going to see with Kyle is I think he pushed a lot of his chips into the pot, sort of like you did, Eves. And now Kyle has no first and he doesn't want to pick up any, draft picks this year. I don't think, for me, I mean, we'll learn this year, right? Like, cause we just don't know, like, I don't know this shit, but I don't think any dynasty manager should be thinking about skipping a draft, because who knows what the fuck happens. Cause that's the only influx of talent you ever get in dynasty. Like, you're done. If someone's drafted, you have to trade for him now. So I just think about the value of the seconds and the thirds. You always have hits in the seconds and thirds and even fours. And especially in an 8-man league that we have, those fourths are like thirds, seconds are like late seconds. And I think there's a lot of value there. Even in a year like this, what's considered down year, there's so much fucking value to be captured. And I just, Kyle mentioned this on his interview, but again, like I have a hard spot. Like, I think Kyle is a contender who needs to rebuild. Means he's going to have to end up trading some of his pieces away. His window, I mean, I view him as a clear-cut contender now, but similar, like next year, next 2 years, what happens in 3 years from now is sort of the question that I have there. And thankfully he wasn't as greedy as Eves was in pushing all of his chips into the pot, because he's still got his picks. But that's how I look at, Kyle. John, I think John's had a very unlucky year last year, because I really thought he could make into the playoffs after the draft. I thought him as the top 5 rosters that I'm not better than. And for making it, I thought John would be, able to get in there, no problem. But yeah, I think John building on. So I think the interesting thing that John happened for John last season, he was just savvy as hell in mid-season, because he's like, you know what, I can't win this year. And I'm going to have to trade all these aging pieces away. I know he wants to trade Nick Chubb still too. Like, so, those are players that he knows that it's aging, it's depreciating assets, and he's committed to building around the Justin Herbert timeline. The only issue that I have, the challenge that I have for John, when I look at his roster, is and same thing with Travis, I'll talk about. It's like, what can you do as a team that's committed to rebuild when you got Brandon with all these fucking picks? No one's going to have first available until the next offseason when everyone gets firsts. So I think that's sort of the challenge there. I still feel like John could be a trade partner for Brandon next year, like mid-season, if John is willing to push back on his timeline a little bit more, and Brandon, hits on his 2023 sort of picks, because he's got a lot of young pieces. I mean, Chris Godwin's going to have value then. Devontae Smith is there. DJ Moore's still going to have value then. Maybe he's in a better situation with a quarterback that gets drafted Carolina in 2023. Who knows? But yeah, I think generally I look at his quarterbacks, for example, as him building off the, after Justin Herbert, I feel really good about, because he's now got Trevor Lawrence and he's got Trey Lance, and if they all hit, you're talking about probably the hardest quarterback trio to sort of go up against for the next 10 years. So I think John's in a good spot in the sense that he's got his anchor pieces that different than mine, which is I'm anchored around running backs. Oh my God. I'm anchored around running backs, which is tough, but he's anchored around quarterbacks, which is hell of a lot better. So I think that's how I sort of feel about John, and John's done also a good job of just keeping his first draft picks. And he was never greedy to start. So I think John's going to be a contender. He's going to be a playoff tier for sure in the next 2 to 3 years with all the pieces that he has, but I just don't see a pathway for contention for him in the next four years just because of Brandon. And then that moves it over to Brandon, right? In terms of the roster, I don't think I have to say anything. Like, his roster's not going anywhere this year. Is that a filter you put on Tina Kimes?
Me, I feel like Eve is about to have a freaking child over there. What is going? Oh my gosh!
Oh Jesus!
I didn't even notice that. Sorry, roast me, Tim. I know you're just down deep. You're just jealous you don't get to build a team like I do. So come on, let me hear it.
I'll start off there. I am jealous that I don't get to build it from the ground up, because I think there's a lot of fun in that. Like, I would have loved to just, like, I sometimes think about, like, I wonder if I can join a dynasty with just like nothing and just build my way up from picks. There's like another level of a challenge and fun that you can get it. And like, as like fantasy addicts like you and me, I think that's like super, super fucking fun. And you have the closest thing to that. I just don't see a single player on your roster that's going to be a top 10 in any position, but you know that, like, you've traded all of them away, or the ones that are top 10, you're probably going to trade away this year. Right. I think I call this a great experiment for you. I said that all the time, because the reality is, like, I wonder if 5 years from now, we're going to look back and recalculate how we perceive the value of draft picks, because it's really going to come around to like how much you hit on, right? Those picks. And it goes back to like my trade for Josh Allen, specifically seeking out Josh Allen with you, because my hedge is that hitting is going to be hard. Hitting for, low end top 10s or, top 20s, I don't think it's going to be hard in an 8-person league with all the draft capital that you have in a strong draft class coming in 2023. But I think the challenge that I see is, do you have 2 Josh Allens, or do you even have a Josh Allen and a Dak Prescott after all those, picks? So I think, and I know you weren't excited about Dak Prescott, but I think you'd be thrilled if you picked him up with one of your draft picks, right? Like even a first, for example, someone that actually produces like a Dak. So I don't know. It's just like the great experiment. I just don't know what the answer is going to be, but I know you're going to be under pressure than anyone else to perform, because you've set yourself with the direction there, right? So that's all I'll say. Like, again, like, I think you are the market setter for what these picks are worth. And you're also going to be the market maker in terms of allowing the rest of the league to understand the true values of first round picks. And we're going to all come to understanding what that looks like in the next 3 years. But in terms of how I feel like when you do hit on these things, I mean, you're savvy. I know you. I play fantasy with you for several fucking years now. So I know as soon as you get those picks turned into players that are hits, I know you're going to be able to make a shit ton of moves to make that work. But it's just a question around, do those picks actually turn into players that's actually worthwhile to move and build around? But it's a great experiment. I fucking love it. And I talked about my roster, but I think the one thing that I'll talk quickly about my roster beyond the trades is the only thing I want to do now is just be in the conversation for a contender, because I think I get stronger over time while other contenders, maybe minus Ryan, get weaker, and Kyle and Eves. And then I hope that window is big enough before Brandon comes into power. Oh my God, Eves. And then I'll make this sort of quick for the remaining sort of, I think I got one more team, right? Oh, I got 2 more teams. I got Travis and Sergey. How are you doing that real time, Eves?
You don't want to mess with me when it comes to Photoshop. I'm just
right.
trying to throw you off your game. Is it working?
Not really. I don't think so. But
It's throwing Brandon off his game.
I mean, you got nicer after after he went. So, I mean,
No,
maybe
I
it is
think,
different now.
but this is the topic here is how I really feel. Like, I don't think I'm better than everyone else. Absolutely not. It just, I think there's teams that are greedy like Eves who are in dire fucking situations that are hard. I'm going to pick on that. I think there's also very not savvy moves that were made, and I'm going to pick on those things. And, you know, and there's teams that I feel fucking really great about, like Ryan's team. And I think he's fucking strong. So this is just 100% unfiltered how I feel about, you know, the league at large. Now, moving over to Travis, I think Brandon and I had the conversation with Travis earlier in the earlier episode on the interview with Travis. I think, and Eve, you touched on it. I think, you know, his biggest thing was coming out guns blazing, or wanting to come out, you know, guns blazing, and just wanting to make big moves. And man, when he, you know, the first action that he had in the league was putting up Kyle Pitts on the trade block. I'm like, fuck yes, let me get at it. And he originally only wanted a 2024 first for Pitts. I thought that was actually undervalued. I read you guys the test messages. I ended up sending him, you know, Rondell Moore and Khalil Herbert on top of it, just because I think, you know, 2024 first for Pitts swap probably was, you know, really undervaluing Pitts there. But I was just surprised that he offered me this year's what became a 102 for basically what was a 10, what Eves at your my pick next year, which I hope is going to be at least a 108, right? So I think for Travis, he's learning fast. I didn't know what to expect when we had the interviews this year, this series, but I think he's learning really, really fast, and he's set on a timeline now, which was, you know, I don't think when he traded Pitts away, I was like, are you going for it? But he wanted picks. But if you want picks, why are you trading Pitts away? But it turns out, like, I think in the early episodes, there's actual specific tight end that he's targeting, which I think is like fucking great. One that we have a manager like that's committed to be building for the future. I think Joe Burrow could not be, I have Joe Burrow as a top 4 QB in Dynasty for me. Top 5, I don't think anyone has him below top 5. You know, I think you can make an argument for top 3. But I just really like Joe Burrow, and I think he's still far from what he could be, especially as him and Jamar Chase as a pairing get stronger together. And you couldn't load him up with better, you know, opportunities in terms of the receiving weapons that he's got with T. Higgins there too. I think he's very high on Jerry Jeudy. So when I was chatting with him on the interviews, like before he even joined, he was mentioning he was really excited when he saw Jerry Jeudy's, you know, name when you share the roster with him. I just don't see how Jerry Jeudy ended up, you know, making a room for himself with that crowded sort of receiver field. Even Tim Patrick there and Courtland Sutton, both of them are paid. And you know, it's going to be hard to trade that. So there's no dead cap space. There's no benefit to cutting them for at least, I think, the next 2-3 years, right, Brandon? The contract that they've signed. So what happens to Jerry Jeudy? He's going to be up for contract in 2 years from now. What happens then, right? Or maybe actually a year from now, next year, because he wasn't a first round pick. So like, what happens then? I think that's sort of, was he a first round pick? Anyways, like, that's just the thing that I worry about there. Obviously you can get excited about Russell Wilson throwing the ball now, but I mean, Russell Wilson's not going to throw 50 times a game. Like, where did the targets go? I think that's sort of, you know, the thought process for me on his team. I think we're far from seeing Travis be done with his moves. I can completely see him trading players like Adam Thielen, Mike Williams, Miles Sanders. He's got some other players too, like a Tyler Lockett, for example, that probably, you know, definitely doesn't fit his timeline. So that's how I feel about Travis. I think obviously he's a new manager, so I don't really know what his other tendencies are like or anything like that, but that's, you know, how I feel about it. I think, again, Travis is that other manager that's committed to rebuilding. He's probably the only manager that's committed to rebuilding, actually, because John is kind of making a decision mid-season. But for Travis, I'm just thinking, it's like, man, your timeline to rebuild is going to be so fucking long because of Brandon. Like, what first round picks is he going to be getting? He's got second round picks, which is awesome. He's got a ton next season. But I just wonder, like, you know, is he going to be even a playoff team come 2024? He's not going to have enough injection there. And then 2025, I think what I'm worried about Travis is with the moves that the previous league last year saw with me accruing picks, and then this roster seeing how Brandon's accruing picks. I think as soon as the 2025 first get reopened come off season, I think everyone either wants to hold it or that they're going to compete with so many other people than just one who want to be buying those first round picks. So I just worry about people like Travis who are committed to rebuilding right now. And so maybe, Eves, I've ripped on you enough, but so on a positive note, maybe that's smart. It's like, there's no way to rebuild right now. So just write out for 2 years and then rebuild after that. And lastly, we'll go over to Sergey. I thought he was actually pretty sneaky fucking genius after the expansion draft, by the way. Just because he picked his players that he wanted. Justin Jefferson for $150 in an auction, that's a fucking steal. But I just thought he really overvalued Michael Carter. I thought he really overvalued Elijah Moore. And I think he paid a lot of money for Jalen Hurts too. I guess he's loaded now with talent, so maybe that plays out. But after that draft, I was like, oh, good on Sergey. He's rebuilding for the future off the bat, because that's probably what I would have done as a new manager coming into the league like this. And then he makes a trade for Joe Mixon right away, and then sends all his first away. And then he's excited about James Robinson, who tore his Achilles. And he's got Travis Etienne, who's going to be, gearing up this season. So that's sort of how, I just was shocked. So I still don't know if Sergey looks at himself as a playoff contender or what he wants to do. I get it from a new manager standpoint. Maybe you want to look to be competitive right off the bat, but I felt like he shot away a really good chance at building a really strong league right after the expansion draft, because if he did so, Brandon doesn't get his firsts. And then talking about all these ripples that are created when you do this, I don't trade for Josh Allen. I think all these things, like the butterfly effect, could have made our league today look very, very different had Sergey gone in a different direction. So that's all 18s, how I honestly feel about everyone across the board. And I'm glad I was able to sort of talk my mind and not be political about it from a commissioner's seat.
That's fun. That's fun to for you to not hold back. I mean, most of it was fun except all the daggers you stabbed me with, but everything else was great. Yeah, I mean, I feel like definitely the draft, out of everything that happened this season, the draft, the expansion draft, and probably the moves that Brandon made definitely are the two things that just shifted everything in the league for sure. At the end of the day, no one should be in this league because of the money side of it. Everyone should be in for, the competitiveness and the trash talking and the moves and like the money side, or that to me, like, that's the price of admission, right? Like if I play, it's like I look at it as anything else. Like I play hockey, I play golf, like I do other things, and all of those things have a fee and a cost associated to it, and it's actually much higher than this league. And this gives us almost entertainment, especially for us Canadians when we get the shitty fucking winters that we go through, and then this just gives us something to do to pass time, and when the sun starts to go down a little bit earlier than it usually does. So yeah, it's a good crew, but good feedback. Yeah, I tried to contain my emotions, but I did the best I could.
And it was a roller coaster watching you, man. You must be tired after this one. Jeez. But yeah, thank you, Tim. Thanks for the candid thoughts. And I mean, it's always interesting to hear your perspectives and your analytics. So yeah, thanks for sharing some of that. And that's about it for us.